Hello, huddlers. Welcome to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife's Recruit, Retain, Reactivate, Harvest Huddle Hour, R3H3. In this episode, we're going to discuss
an introduction to lobstering, a discussion on free diving and hoop netting techniques, along with tips for what gear to buy and where to find regulations and mentorship resources.
These R3H3 recordings are a resource designed by CDFW and the R3 team to bring more Californians to hunting, fishing, foraging, shooting sports, and just getting outdoors. They're meant for a beginner audience or those looking to gain knowledge around a new skill. If at any time you have questions, comments, concerns, or even an idea for an upcoming huddle, just reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. Our email address is r3statewideprogram@wildlife.ca.gov. And now for our presentation.
An introduction to lobstering. California's coastal waters are home to several different invertebrates, meaning species that lack a bony skeleton. The California spiny lobster has a particularly special place within this group as a highly sought-after target for both California's recreational and commercial fisheries.
The scientific name for those interested is Pennuliris interruptus.
To get us started in our introduction to lobstering here in California, we'll talk with Jenny Hofmeister.
I'm an environmental scientist for the California Department of Fish and Wildlife in the invertebrate program, and I manage the commercial and recreational spiny lobster fishery.
Jenny also enjoys recreational lobstering.
So I've only been diving for lobster for about 4 years now. I still, consider myself a newer diver just because there's so much to learn. There's so many experienced participants in the fishery that have a lot to teach me, a lot to teach anybody who asks. It's a very generous community as far as my experience has been in terms of individuals willing to help out and advise new divers and new participants. And then this particular season, I have a friend who's going to take me out hoop netting to teach me how to hoop net for the first time. And I'm also very excited about that.
We'll talk about hoop netting in a moment, but for now, Jenny says it was her family's love of diving for another marine species that sparked her initial interest in ocean harvesting.
I grew up in Northern California, and my kind of first introduction to fishing and free diving for fishing was with the abalone fishery. Because I'm a Northern California person, my dad is an abalone diver, I'm an abalone diver. So that was what I was initially most familiar with. It wasn't until I moved to Southern California and was hired by the department that I became interested in lobster diving and participating in the lobster fishery, because our spiny lobster only go up to about point conception. So it is very much a Southern California fishery. We do have participants from all over the country, out of state, come and participate in this fishery. I love lobster. I love eating lobster. I don't think I've actually ever met a crustacean that I didn't enjoy. So when an opportunity was there for me to get lobster on a regular basis, or from definitely more than just a special occasion fancy meal at a seafood restaurant, and also as an avid scuba diver, the opportunity presented itself, and of course I was going to take advantage of that.
And before you dive into attempting to catch your first lobster, let's hear a bit of background on the species of lobster found here in California.
They are a rocky reef kelp forest species found in shallow waters down to depths of about 300 feet. And we use information from the commercial fishery and the recreational fishery to assess how much lobster is being taken each year, the size of the lobster. We have a few different metrics we use to assess the sustainability of the fishery, because the whole goal of all of this is to ensure that we continue to have lobster and are able to fish for lobster for decades to come. And so aspects of our fishery regulations, like when the season is closed, is the peak of lobster reproduction. The size limit allows for lobsters to reproduce 2 or 3 times before they're vulnerable to the fishery. a lot of those regulations are in place specifically to ensure the sustainability of the fishery and make sure the populations stay healthy.
And in all the conversations she's had about spiny lobster as a fishery, what's the number one thing people ask Jenny about?
Very common question I get is, where are the claws? We don't have any claws with our spiny lobster. Actually, clawed lobsters are much more rare than spiny lobsters. Of all the lobster species in the world, I think there's only 2 or 3 that have claws. Most every other species is spiny like ours. So no claws, but full of spines, as the name would suggest, and which makes handling them, an additional type of challenging. You don't have to watch out for the claws, but you do have to watch out for the spines. Make sure you have purchased your spiny lobster report card. This is required for every single person wanting to take lobster, regardless of age, regardless of location. You have to have this spiny lobster report card, and it is something that cannot be printed at home on a home printer. It has to be printed by a designated license counter or sports store or bait shop. A lot of bait shops will sell them. And on that report card is information about reporting. So probably the most important thing about the report card is all of your fishing effort, regardless of if you bought the card and just never went out for lobster, or if you went out 5 times and didn't catch anything. You're still required to report that information to us at Fish and Wildlife. And that can be done online, or it can be mailed in. Online is certainly the preferred way, because then you get a confirmation code back and you have documentation that your information was received. And that information is due by April 30th of every year. So for the 2022-23 lobster season, data from this upcoming season will be due to the department by April 30th of 2023. And if you forget or do not report your data, you will be subject to, it's called a non-return fee when you go to purchase next season's report card. So the non-return fee is a little bit of a misnomer, just because even if you returned the information late, you still will be subject to the non-return fee. So it's information that you have to give us your effort data before the deadline to not be subject to that fee. And if you do not wish to pay the fee, then you have the option of sitting out for 1 season, and the fee will be waived. And then the following season, you can purchase a new report card with no penalty. And we use those data for understanding where effort is being focused, how much lobster is being taken, the efficiency of certain gear types. It's all really important information just for us to understand the impact of the recreational activity on the populations, and make sure those populations stay healthy and we continue to fish for years to come. And the other important piece of equipment that's required for every gear type, regardless if you're hoop netting, free diving, or scuba diving, is some type of measuring device. And the minimum size for lobster is 3 1/4 inches of the carapace length. So just that first segment of the body of the lobster. And as long as it's 3 1/4 inches, then that individual is legal and a keeper. If it is smaller than that size, then once you catch it, immediately measure it. If it's smaller than 3 1/4 inches carapace length, you must immediately return it to the ocean. You can't keep it in your bag and worry about measuring it later. You must make sure that you catch it, measure it, determine immediately whether or not it's legal size. Keep it if it's legal size, you'll let it go if it's not.
Now that we know about lobster season and regulations, let's talk to Jenny about how we go about catching them. First thing to know, there are 3 ways to catch lobster in California: hoop netting, scuba diving, and free diving. Jenny's preferred method, free diving.
Free diving is both the most accessible way to get lobster, but also the most challenging, which is difficult. It's accessible in that you don't need as much gear as with scuba. Scuba, you need that certification, you need to have all of the equipment. If you go hoop netting, you need to have, purchase the hoop nets, maybe even a boat or a kayak, something to go out if you don't want to fish from shore or a pier. But free diving has its additional challenges. You're holding your breath. You are trying to manage looking for lobster while also carrying a light and your measuring device and the things that you might need. Lobster are pretty sensitive to vibrations in the water, so it just takes practice. And I think probably the number one rule for diving, whether it's scuba or free diving, is don't go alone, both from a safety perspective and also from a getting over that maybe initial hesitation perspective. If you are able to go out with someone who is more experienced than you, or even has just gone out one or two times and has been able to overcome maybe that initial hesitation, then that certainly helps a lot.
Something else that helps, knowing the best time to find them.
It is definitely easier, I think, to get lobster at night because they are nocturnal and they are crawling around, and you don't have to worry about reaching your hand into rocks and cracks and crevices as much. But if diving at night concerns you, diving during the day is also you are able to get lobster diving during the day. It might be a little more challenging, but it is still an option.
One take method for lobster during the day doesn't require much diving. You don't even need fins. This form of lobstering happens at negative tides and requires searching for lobster under exposed rock near the shoreline. So now that we know where and when to find them, what types of equipment do we need to make our attempt successful? And will it be expensive?
Getting lobster in California does require some specialty equipment. From a free diving perspective, it is the least amount of equipment that you'll need. You'll need some type of wetsuit, even though our surface waters have been quite warm. For safety and exposure reasons, you'll want some type of wetsuit. I usually dive with a 7 mil with a hood and gloves because especially if you're going down deeper than 20 feet or so, it does get cold. You'll need some type of weight belt because those wetsuits give you additional buoyancy. The neoprene adds a buoyancy, so you need some type of weight belt to make sure you can actually get down underwater. A mask and a snorkel, fins. These are things that can be purchased or rented, depending on how long you think you'll want to use the equipment for. If you're not sure if it's something you'll enjoy, renting is a great option, or borrowing from friends. Just make sure things fit you well and that you're comfortable in them. And then if you choose to go diving at night, then you will need some type of underwater light. Those unfortunately can be a little bit pricey just because as soon as you enter salt water and the pressure of the water into things, it makes electronics a little bit more challenging. But some type of dive light. Dive light is also helpful if you're going out during the day, just because it can give you, an extra tool to look in those cracks and crevices. You'll need a measuring device, and you'll need some type of bag or something to put the legal size lobsters in once you've kept them. So it does require specialty gear. If you scuba dive, then now you have some, even more additional gear, such, the BC and the regulator and the tank, as well as, some type of depth gauge, dive computer, and some type and a scuba certification, a basic one at minimum. So there is some additional gear with that. And then if you hoop net, you'll have, purchasing hoop nets and the buoy that marks it, the line that, that's attaching the buoy to the net, some type of bait container, and the bait itself. So it is, it is a more specialty fishery. There's some more specialty gear involved, but, there's always the opportunity to go out with friends, borrow gear from friends as you're learning from them, renting gear from local dive shops. If you're not sure if purchasing that gear is available to you, just make sure that you feel comfortable with the gear and safe with the gear, because safety is definitely the number one concern for all participants who wish to go out and get some lobster.
And if diving or going out at night, the amount of gear or any of this information is just getting a little intimidating, Jenny has some words of encouragement.
If you just set your expectations of having fun, getting out there in the water, getting out there in our beautiful California coastal environments. Even if you get some lobster or you don't get some lobster, it's still going to be a good time. It still is going to be stories to tell. And nobody is perfect on their first try. Even the most experienced, lobster person out there who comes home with trophy-sized lobsters every weekend had to start somewhere. And so that's what you have to do, is start somewhere. Keep the expectations to just having fun and getting the experience. And the more you do it, the better you'll get.
Jenny also wants you to know that the lobstering community is a welcoming one, and there are resources and people willing to help you on your journey.
I found that Facebook groups are some of the best places to go to ask questions and get information. I live in San Diego, so I'm a member of, there's a Southern California Lobster page. There's a San Diego Fishing and Lobstering page. And I'm sure there's more localized to other communities throughout Southern California. But I see all the time people ask questions. I'm brand new to this fishery. Any advice on how to start? I want to go out for the first time. Would anybody willing to come out with me? And there's, usually a dozen people that are like, oh, I'll take you out. I'll take you out. I've never seen anyone ask a question and then just get completely, shut down. People might not tell you where their secret spot to get the best lobster are, but that's something you'll figure out on your own. But in terms of getting started, there's, those are great places to go to. Some of the outdoor news outlets usually have a lot of resources, like Western Outdoor News I think they actually just published an article about some advice on how to do your first lobster season. Bloody Decks is also an online community where you can ask questions about all types of fishing, not just lobstering. And I think they are focused throughout the whole country, not just California. So there's a lot of different good information there. And we also have an email with Fish and Wildlife, lobster@wildlife.ca.gov, where people can ask questions about regulations to make sure that you are in compliance if you're going out to get some lobster.
Before we move on, I have to ask, Jenny, what is your favorite way to prepare lobster once you've caught it?
The great thing about lobster is that you don't have to do a whole lot to it for it to be good. It's not a particularly difficult thing to cook. Fortunately, you just have to heat it up and it's delicious. Cook it on a pan with a little bit of butter, grill it. Grilling it is really good. Again, with a little bit of butter. Lobster tacos, also delicious. And in San Diego, we've been having this, or not, I say we, it's not we. There's at the Tuna Harbor Dockside Market, they've been hosting Lobster Fest every year. It's usually the Saturday or Sunday after the commercial season opens. And there's a lot of local fishermen that participate in Lobster Fest. And one of the things they've been doing is each individual lobster person has a recipe card at their sales stand. And so if you're buying lobster from them, or even if you're just kind of wandering through and looking at the prices, you can grab one of their recipe cards. And those are, the tried and true recipes of the lobster permit holders who are out there every year and the truest experts on how to cook lobster. But you can't beat just grilling it with a little bit of butter.
Or if you're like me, a lot of butter. Yum. Thanks, Jenny. From our Zoom conversation with Jenny, we move out into the field for opening day of lobster season. Lucky for us, Jenny had a planned trip for her first attempt at lobstering with a hoop net and agreed to take us along.
Right like that.
Avid hoop netter Nick Wegner will talk us through properly launching the net.
You want to make sure that the hoop is facing upwards so that it lands on the bottom correctly so the lobster can crawl right in without any problems.
Once your net is launched, you wait. And after some time has passed, you pull the nets and check for lobster.
Oh, shark.
And sometimes your nets catch more than lobster. Lobster that are smaller than legal size are released back immediately, while ones that look large enough are measured. For some final hoop netting advice, we hear from frequent lobster hooper John Hyde with tips for getting started.
You're definitely going to need some hoop nets and a buoy of some sort. Light stick or some other light device is good so that you can actually find the hoop nets in the dark. We use a spar buoy to really help get the things to pop out in the night so we can find them easily. When you pull the hoop net, you definitely want to have some gloves to pick up the lobster and of course a gauge to go through and measure the lobster properly. One thing that we always like to have on the boat is a bucket to help us deal with any moray eels that may find their way into the boat, as they're pretty slippery and kind of bitey, so we don't want to keep them in our hands. Lights, headlamps are always good because you're fishing in the dark and it's hard to measure the lobster and see what you're doing without a little bit of light, but you also don't want to have your headlamps on all the time because it's dark out and you're trying to go around, especially if you're on your boat and you're trying to keep your night vision intact.
And final tip from John.
One thing you can try if you're a little bit nervous about starting this on your own, a number of the commercial fishing boats in the local marinas will take people out on their boat to do hoop netting from them. And that's a good way to see other people do it that have been doing it for a while and get a hang of it. If you have your own boat, it's relatively easy to go out and try. You won't be perfect the first time, but it's something that you will pick up and learn along the way.
For a final aspect of our introduction to lobstering video, we'd like to share some information gathered from our CDFW wardens during a past trip out patrolling opening day of lobster season, where we'll learn a bit more about regulations and MPAs.
I'm Lieutenant Rod Buckler with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. I've been with the department 18 years, and I am currently the skipper of the California patrol vessel Coho. We're out here at Catalina Island hoping to check lobster fishermen for the opening of the lobster season. It's a season that goes for 6 months, and there should be quite a few people out and about.
Essentially what we're doing is making sure that everybody has the right fishing licenses and lobster report cards, and we're also making sure that they retain only within their limit and that everything that they're retaining is within the proper size constraints. Lobster have a size of 3 1/4 inches carapace length. And what that means is we use this gauge to measure the main body of the lobster, and if it fits within this gauge, which is 3 1/4 inches, that means that lobster is undersized and therefore cannot be retained. Lobster is one of our state's valuable resources, and we like to see everybody out enjoying that resource, but also at the same time making sure that they're following all the pertinent regulations.
We have divers as well as hoop netters that come out. We have charter boats that come out, private boaters that come out, and then we have residents as well that live here, and everybody's trying to take lobsters on the opener. So that's our goal, is to go out and check licenses, check catch, check the size limits. I've done 18 lobster openers now, and so based on that experience, it should be pretty busy. Out here at Catalina Island, we have multiple MPAs. Some of them are limited use. You can fish certain species of fish in some of them, and some of them are no take whatsoever. Over my shoulder is the Blue Cavern MPA. The boundary is right off the bow of the boat here, and that boundary for the Blue Cavern MPA is an MPA that is an absolute no-take zone. So if we do find any divers in there tonight, we will likely jump in the water and go down below the surface of the water to see if they are taking anything out of the water. They are welcome to dive in the protected area, and they can take pictures and video and just enjoy their dive, but you can't take any resources from the MPA. So here specifically in the Blue Cavern MPA, it has been a very successful, it's one of our older MPAs in the state of California. It's been very successful. I've dove here and have experience diving here a lot. And there are a large amount of lobsters as well as large lobsters here. There's a lot of fish in the area and very large fish. So it's a neat experience to be able to see the MPA working. You come here and you see larger fish than you'll see almost anywhere on the island, and you'll see more fish than you'll see anywhere on the island. So it's a very direct reflection of the impact that the protected areas can have.
For more information on MPAs and marine species and fishing regulations, visit wildlife.ca.gov/regions/marine.
All right, that does it for this Recruit, Retain, Reactivate, Harvest Huddle Hour. If you have questions for any of our presenters, for the R3 team, or for me, feel free to email us. Again, our email address is r3statewideprogram@wildlife.ca.gov. Feel free to also use that email if you have an idea for an upcoming huddle, or if you want to share with us your favorite outdoor photos for our R3 Photo of the Month. Speaking of,
This month's Photo of the Month comes to us from Ed, with his photo of his Dorado catch off Dana Point. Thanks for the photo, Ed.
until our next huddle, tight lines and straight shooting, thanks for being here.